cultivate internal and external harmony. This focus on harmony is central to the Buddha's teachings and the way in which he established a spiritual community. One definition for harmony is a consistent, orderly, or pleasing arrangements of parts, congruity. The Buddha established a community of disciples based on what he called the fourfold Sangha, composed of fully ordained men and women, bhikkhus and bhikkhunis in Pali, and lay female and male followers, all on the path to peace. All four of these components were necessary to him for this model that he developed and proposed. Each part was essential. None was more important or less important. They were all essential because the bhikkhus and bhikkhunis provided spiritual teaching, support, and inspiration for the lay followers, and the lay followers receive that spiritual support and provide the monastics with the physical requirements of food, housing, medicine, and clothing. Each required the other for a full and happy survival. And the four together create a spiritual community based on mutual effort, cooperation, rapport, compatibility, affinity, unity, sympathy, and concord. And that list of words that I just read are some of the most commonly cited synonyms when I went to the thesaurus for harmony. Other ones: mutual effort, cooperation, rapport, compatibility, affinity, unity. And these teachings that we've all been practicing and studying always direct us back to harmony without, externally with others, and internally with our own bodies, hearts, and minds. These teachings of the Buddha are for training the mind, is often the way it's expressed. And the Pali word being translated as mind is citta. But the English word mind is also used to translate another Pali word, manas. So they both get translated as mind, but in fact they mean slightly different things, and that difference is important. So manas is the mind of the sixth of the six senses. You know, that the Buddha said there were six senses, and in addition to the five we know about, he added the mind. So manas is this sixth sense mind, and it's the mind that thinks and cognizes. Each of the six senses has a sense consciousness. When the sense faculty receives a sense object, the result is one of these sense consciousnesses. So smelling, tasting, feeling, hearing, seeing, and thinking. So for example, when the eye receives light, the result is seeing. We know that, right? And when the mind, manas, the sense faculty, receives a thought, thinking, or it receives perception, thinking results. So while manas and citta are both translated as mind, citta is different than this cognizing intellect of manas. Because while manas thinks, citta feels. Citta is that which is touched and aware. So when I'm speaking of awareness or heart, I'm referring to this citta sense, not the thinking mind, but the feeling heart. And when we speak of our practice as training the mind, we primarily mean citta. We are training the heart that feels and experiences awareness. Ajahn Sucitto, a teacher who wrote that book I mentioned this morning, defines heart in this way. He says, or citta, charta, heart, in this way. He says it's that quality of awareness that feels hurt and joy, bitterness, guilt, and love. In meditation, we tune into it through directing our minds towards receptivity. This meditative attention or awareness is like listening, with the occasional mental reminder to keep it on track. Thus, when we talk about something like harmony, we're speaking about an experience of citta, of heart. We don't think ourselves into harmony. Harmony is felt by the citta, by heart and awareness. It's a felt experience of balance, ease, fitting together, coordination. And it arises from wholesome, open, caring qualities of heart. We began the retreat by determining the 5 precepts. And the Buddha taught these precepts to establish and encourage harmony. And so that's why we recommit to them on a retreat like this. As was evident in the news recently, when the Speaker of the House process was underway, harmony only occurs in an environment of virtue, honesty, and safety. When those are absent, harmony is too, and conflict becomes the norm, as we saw. The precepts that we determined together offer us that sort of protection, internally and externally. When in a community abiding by these precepts, we can feel safe from harm to our body, our possessions, and trust that others won't intentionally lie or cheat us. And as importantly, we determine to notice ill will, dishonesty, and unwholesome attitudes and behaviors towards ourselves, and redirect the heart towards goodwill, honesty, and goodness. Living by the precepts in this way offers all of us, everybody, a safety that allows for harmony, cooperation, and goodwill to be present. That's why they were so important to the Buddha and for all of us. And this kind of harmony is needed because living with other human beings isn't easy, is it? At least not for me. Is it easy for you guys? We don't always easily fit in. Often we may feel alienated, different, unique, separate. Although none of us can survive without others, learning how to live harmoniously in community isn't easy. And we often rub up against one another in very challenging ways. My husband reminded me just yesterday of a funny phrase that fits this situation. He reminded me that accidents happen most often at intersections. And that's true of our experience with other human beings. They occur where we intersect with one another, where we have different views and opinions or are going different directions. Learning to live and operate in community harmoniously is a really important, significant part of this path to peace. There's a beautiful story about a monastery where one of the monks couldn't get along with the rest of the community. He was uncooperative, he didn't follow the rules, and just nobody liked him. Individual monks would regularly go to the abbot to complain about this difficult monk. Eventually, this difficult fellow disrobed and left the community, and the monks were so happy. They felt that, okay, now the community could be harmonious. But soon, another equally difficult monk came to join the Sangha. So several monks, again, went to the abbot to ask him, how could this happen, that someone so difficult was again part of the Sangha, part of the community? And the abbot responded, yes, I know, it was really hard to find him and convince him to come. The abbot understood that living in community always involves times when we are not so happy with other people, times when we rub against one another. And it is through this rubbing up against one another that, okay, so it's through this that our likes and our dislikes are sort of our rough edges, that they get softened. They get rounded, just like sharp, ragged stones at the edge of a body of water that eventually smooth out. Once those ragged edges smooth out, it's so much easier for us to live together gently, with goodwill, with harmony. Sometimes on retreat, we may notice these rough edges in ourselves. And oftentimes these rough edges are kind of small, maybe even comical, but they're still a little hard. Maybe we notice an irritation about how somebody leaves their shoes in the hall, or how their cushion and blankets are too near to ours, or how they're walking too fast or too slow for our liking. Acknowledging these spiky responses and softening into them, not blaming ourselves or the other person, but bringing forth goodwill, is the basis and ground for safety and harmony. And it's a learning process. We likely will get it wrong sometimes, but that is also how we learn and how those sharp edges get softened into compassion, into kindness. Fortunately, the Buddha, as always, gave us clear and helpful teachings on how to be in harmony with others, how to work in a situation with other people. So I want to share a sutta, one of my favorites, which is a teaching on how do we work together? How do we relate with somebody else? So this is called the Siddhaka Sutta, and it tells the story of two acrobats performing in a town of Siddhaka. And it's not Neil Sedaka. Sorry. The acrobats were street performers. They would complete tricks on this acrobat, on this bamboo pole, and then receive money for their performance. And I've been told that there are actually performers like this to this day in India. Maybe some of you have been and know that. I don't have firsthand information. But the sutta tells of a time when there was a master acrobat and his young apprentice. They were performing together. And as they were performing, the master said to his apprentice, Medakatalika is her name, Medakatalika. He said to her, "You protect me, dear Medakatalika, and I'll protect you. Thus guarded by one another, protected by one another, we'll display our skills, collect our fee, and get down safely from this bamboo pole." But upon hearing this, the apprentice said to the master, "That's not the way to do it, teacher." Pretty brave of her to do that. She said, "You protect yourself, teacher, and I'll protect myself. Thus, each self-guarded and self-protected will display our skills, collect our fee, and get down safely from the bamboo pole." The teacher was not happy at being corrected by an apprentice, but suggested they go to ask the Buddha which of them was correct. And when they approached and explained the situation, the Buddha replied, "It's just as the apprentice, Medakatalika, said. I will protect myself and you protect yourself. And how is it that protecting oneself, one protects others? By pursuing, developing, and cultivating the 4 establishments of mindfulness. It is in such a way that by protecting oneself, one protects others." So let me unpack that a little bit. So we train chitta, we train the heart to be steady, calm, and kind through these 4 establishments of mindfulness, through attention to the body, awareness of feeling, awareness of mind, and awareness of Dhamma. In this way, we are able to protect others. A balanced and stable acrobat is less likely to unbalance or knock over his partner, right? And just as it is for the acrobats, our steadiness makes it easier, safer, and steadier for those around us. Our balance and steadiness are a model and encouragement for them. And when we are balanced, we are less liable to fall and knock over anybody else. And just as we protect others by protecting ourselves, it's also true that by protecting others, we protect ourselves. Through relating to others with patience, harmlessness, loving kindness, and empathy, we offer them protection, right? We offer them safety and kindness. We don't harm or abuse them. And in so doing, we are protected because we haven't abused them. They're not going to turn around and shoot us. In protecting myself, I protect others. In protecting others, I protect myself. To protect myself, I will develop these ways of mindfulness, mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of feelings, of heart, and of Dhamma. To protect others, these establishments of mindfulness, these mindfulness abilities result in patience, kindness, harmlessness, and empathy that causes no harm to anyone else. The Buddha is telling us that it isn't a matter of choosing between protecting ourselves and protecting others. He is saying that we begin with ourselves. We must begin with ourselves, focused on developing citta, awareness, heart. But in so doing, the consequence is that others are protected. If we intend to offer kindness, protection, and safety to others, we really must begin with ourselves. We can't turn our safety or security over to anybody else. That doesn't mean we are self-centered. Developing our heart protects us, but it is also the best and only way we can protect others. Yet another simile from the Buddha makes exactly this same point. Training our heart means it has the strength, steadiness, and courage to be open and available to other people. To be available and of help in that way, we start with ourselves to soften and open our hearts and to build this strength and clarity of mind. Because only then can we be of real help. And this is the verse that I think makes that so clear. It says, and it is in terms of a he, I'm afraid, because that's how they were always written in the old days. If a man going down into a river, swollen and swiftly flowing, is carried away by the current, how can he help others across? Let me read it one more time. If a man going down into a river, swollen and swiftly flowing, is carried away by the current, how can he help others across? In the same way, if we seek to help those we love, how can we do so if we are caught up in greed, hatred, or delusion? As expressed in this simile, we need to be on firm ground ourselves to have any hope of pulling others out of the floods of greed, hatred, and delusion that engulf all of us. Developing our wisdom, our kindness, our ability to let go is the only way we could be of help to anyone else. So how do we protect ourselves? What I'm going to suggest is that cultivating a sense of urgency and a determination for consistent practice is the best way to strengthen and commit to offering kindness and compassion to others. This can be a hard-won realization, I think, because it is so easy and understandable, really, to believe that our responsibilities and obligations to others prevent giving full attention to our practice. We have many duties at work and at home, people who truly need our attention and time. So it can feel that perhaps it is most skillful to care for those who need us rather than train our own heart. But in my view, it just isn't true. Of course, we don't ignore the needs of others or our responsibilities, but we also need to notice what is happening for ourselves. Training, opening, softening, healing, and strengthening our heart is the foundation for any good we want to do in the world, whether it is for our immediate family, for our community, or for the wider world. Recommitting to daily practice, or continuing to commit to daily practice and the precepts, will allow us to pursue those other commitments and make the difference we want to make for the people and issues that touch our chitta, touch our heart. Your presence at this retreat actually demonstrates that you understand that making time for your practice has to be a priority. You've done that. Good job. I just the other day heard another lovely talk by Ajahn Amaro on some other suttas that recount a conversation from a long time ago, 155 BCE, before the Common Era, so long time ago, between King Milinda and a great monk, a monk named Nagasena. So King Milinda was actually of Greek ancestry, but had come into this area of West India and was now, the ruler of the area. But so he didn't know much about the Buddhist teachings because he was from elsewhere. So he was very interested in them, wanted to learn about the spiritual practices of the people where he was the ruler. And so he encountered Venerable Nagasena and engaged in these dialogues, which are now recorded in these suttas. And he was particularly interested, or at least one section of these dialogues, are questions about nibbana, about awakening, enlightenment. He was very interested in it. And so he asked Nagasena, he said, well, where is nibbana? And does it have a size, a shape, a time, or a duration? And in each case, Nagasena says, no, those questions do not apply. There is nothing like nibbana. It can't be placed or framed in terms of time or space. Nibbana is neither past, present, or future, neither arisen nor not arisen, nor producible, yet it exists. So after many inquiries like this, when his questions always led to an answer of no, doesn't apply, King Milinda asks, well, is there any place on which a person might stand to realize nibbana? And this time, Venerable Nagasena says, yes, there is. Virtue is the place. Standing on that with wisdom, wherever one might be, whether in the land of the Scythians or the Bactrians, whether in China or Tibet, in Kashmir or Gandhar, on a mountaintop or in the highest heavens, the one who practices rightly realizes nibbana. So our practice of the precepts is that practice of virtue that puts us in the right place to know nibbana. Sometimes our love of the Dhamma and our sincere interest in it can lead us to make our life and our practice more complicated than it needs to be. At least this is true for me. I'm hoping I'm not too different. It might be true for some of you. But complicating things in this way is risky because complication always leads to confusion, and confusion to discouragement, and discouragement to giving up. My hope is that this retreat and all of your practice encourages you and refreshes your determination and commitment to practice. But as you're practicing, whatever may arise, notice if it complicates things and consider how you might uncomplicate and just commit to practicing. Remember the advice that Venerable Nagasena gave and build your practice on virtue on these simple precepts that we recited at the beginning of the retreat and on meditation. But don't try to make the meditation anything fancy or special. You don't need any special techniques or abilities. There isn't any part of meditation that any of us are not able to do. Just sit and allow balance and harmony to be present. See what's needed to release for the heart to come into harmony. Notice if the heart is in tune or out of tune, like Venerable Sona and the sutta that David shared last night. The heart will move naturally, just like the body, toward balance when it's given time, attention, care. So we sit and we try to allow the heart, chitta awareness, to come to the fore. Notice the tendency that I think probably we all share to measure our practice as good or bad, strong or weak, improving or declining. Because measuring is not the same as awareness. Measuring is really feeling in the form of favoring or opposing. Our practice is to know feeling simply as feeling, not measuring. This is good feeling, this is bad feeling. There is the knowing of feeling and the feeling itself. But they are not the same. Feeling and awareness of feeling are not the same thing. Ajahn Chah liked to say that feeling and awareness are like oil and water in a bottle. The awareness he's talking about there in the bottle is the awareness of the chitta, of the heart. Awareness meaning that which is sensitive, receptive, touched. Here's how he talked about this. He said that water is different from oil. He says the Buddha lived with sights, sounds, smells, tastes, tactile sensations, ideas. But he was a fully enlightened being, so he saw these things as just that. That's all. He kept on letting go, ever since he saw that the heart was just that. The heart, that's all. Thoughts were just that. Thoughts, that's all. He didn't mix them together. If you can think in this way, if you can feel in this way, you can keep these things separate. Thoughts and feelings are on one side, the heart, awareness, on the other side, just as oil and water in the same bottle separate. Actually, this practice is just about the heart and its feelings. It's not something that you have to run after or struggle for. Breathing continues while working. Nature takes care of the natural processes. All we have to do is try to be aware. Just to keep trying, going inwards to see clearly. Meditation is like this. We cannot run away from feeling. We must know it. Feeling is just feeling. Happiness is just happiness. Unhappiness is just unhappiness. They are simply that. So why should we cling to them? If the mind is clever, simply to hear this is enough to enable us to separate feeling from mind. So trying to keep things simple. Not allowing or noticing when we've gotten things very complicated. As it's often said, the practice is simple, but not easy. Recollecting simplicity, knowing we can do it. and not getting caught up with complex techniques doesn't mean we aren't putting forth effort. This idea of noticing complication can be, I hope, or is for me anyway, incredibly helpful. That it's always the case that when the mind is agitated, when I'm upset, distressed, worried, whatever it may be, if I sort of step back and try to simplify rather than complicate, usually I can see a way more clearly. Ajahn Sumedho has a phrase that I've always very much enjoyed, appreciated, which is that ignorance complicates everything. And the ignorance, of course, he's talking about here is ignorance of these teachings, ignorance of understanding that there is suffering, there's a cause to it, there's an end to it, and there's a way to the end to it. There's a path. So when we can step back and consider, okay, where have I lost those simple teachings? What am I complicating? And how do I simplify this to really see the root problem, which is craving? But sometimes what happens when we become interested in simplicity and we recognize, okay, and we hear Ajahn Chah talk about how natural this is, and that, just keep it simple, keep it easy, keep it natural. Sometimes what can happen is that they encourage us, but they then mistakenly lead to sort of a complacency, a sense of, oh, well, this is all natural, so I don't really have to do anything, which is kind of a comforting thought, but unfortunately not true. Determining to prioritize our practice takes effort, it takes commitment, it takes patience above all, it takes persistence, and living in accord with the precepts. Determination, adhitthana in Pali, is one of the 10 perfections or paramis. So Theravada has 10 perfections, Mahayana has 6. But there are all these qualities that train the heart. The thing, though, is that when we hear a word like determination, we often then go into the wrong sort of effort, like David was speaking about last night. Effort which is forceful, unkind, sort of not very awake, not very aware. The determination the Buddha is talking about, this adhitthana, is not a grit your teeth and muscle through kind of effort. Instead, it's what is often termed as patient endurance, which is a gentle, kind, and wise understanding based on seeing clearly and knowing, this is the most important part, knowing what is for our long-term well-being, even if it isn't easy or comfortable right now. I think of it like brushing my teeth. I am not a big fan of brushing my teeth. I don't particularly enjoy it, but I do it, right? Twice a day, every day, because I know it is for my long-term well-being. I don't have to love it, and I don't have to set some rigid, tight determination. My heart says, I'm going to do this. I'm not going to make a deal of it. I'm just going to do it. And then it's not hard to do, right? It was hard to do when I was even 20, maybe. But now, once you grow up a little bit, it's not hard to do. All of us, everyone struggles to keep on the path at some time or another. And so it's wise to remember that motivation and interest in practice will always vary over time. It's just how it will be, just like everything else. Sometimes it will be easy to stay motivated and interested. Sometimes it won't be. But when it does falter, when that motivation does weaken, when we do get a little complacent maybe, our mindfulness is our very best friend and asset. Because mindfulness is what helps us remember to realize that we, first off, it helps us realize that we don't want to meditate, or maybe even that we aren't meditating at all. It helps us notice that. And that's a really important noticing, right? If we don't notice it, we can't ever fix it. We can't ever change it. Once we know that that's what has happened, the key is to not be discouraged by it. Knowing that feeling is present is not the same as following it or believing it. This is the oil and water that Ajahn Chah was talking about. We can know the feeling is a feeling, but not believe it, not follow it, not get caught in it, and just have the awareness to know it. And this is when our determination, our adhitthana, is most important. We just know, oh, a lack of interest is like this. Low energy feels like this. We can allow it to be fully felt without handing it the reins, without turning our life over to it. We can remember it is just a feeling everybody has at some time or another, and it doesn't need to be in charge. We don't need to let it determine whether we practice or don't practice. Just like when I'm tired or distracted, want to go to bed, and the mind might say, I don't want to brush my teeth tonight. But you brush them anyway, because you know it's essential for your long-term well-being. And you know it'll feel awful in the morning if you don't. In that same way, just sit or chant or do walking or standing or qigong or something that is supportive, wholesome, and kind to the heart. Because that's how our mindfulness and our wisdom get stronger. Bit by bit and moment by moment, we realize that we do not need to be controlled by our impulses or preferences. We can just know them as feelings that will change and pass away. And this is how we free the heart and the mind. Rather than being dragged around by random cravings, we notice what we do or don't do from the perspective of kindness, compassion, and wisdom. By asking ourselves, how can I act in this moment with infinite patience and boundless compassion? Here's another Ajahn Sucitto quote. He says, you look after yourself. You are compassionate towards yourself. With equanimity, you realize that sometimes you just go through stuff. And it's important not to lose faith or give up on yourself or others. So to bring this full circle, hopefully, it is through patient, consistent, and determined practice that harmony arises for ourselves in our own hearts and becomes the gift we can offer others. The gift of practicing together is harmony, unity, and connection. It's what we've all felt being here. And this harmony doesn't require or apply only when physically practicing together. Because in fact, we are practicing together whenever we remember that we are not alone in this practice. We are not alone because our commitment to live a life of ease, kindness, and clarity is shared by millions of others, millions of people who are also doing their very best to reduce suffering in themselves and in others. This path to reducing suffering is safeguarded by the precepts, by meditating as often as you can, daily if possible, studying the teachings of the Buddha. And likely you can think of other people with similar aims, but different methods, studying other teachings. For example, I happened to see last week, maybe some of you did as well, I think it was a CNN special on Dionne Warwick. Anybody see that? It was incredibly powerful. She is a woman who has spent decades using her music and fame to heal and be an example of love, generosity, and kindness in an incredible way. So there are so many people doing this, and that can be a support for us. By coming on retreats like this and our ongoing practice, we choose to deepen all that is wholesome and to clear what obstructs peace and love. May your commitment to yourself and to others keep you practicing throughout 2023 and beyond. May it deepen what is wholesome and clear what is obstructive. May it bring harmony and peace to you and all whose lives you touch. May all beings protect themselves through the skillful intentions of renunciation, goodwill, and harmlessness. May all beings protect others through the skillful intention of renunciation, goodwill, and harmlessness. May all beings live with ease. May all beings be free from suffering and find their way on this path to peace. Thank you for your kind attention. Let's sit for a few minutes. Suggesting we end right now with chanting, that we go into the chant, and I'm fine with that. She says she has no announcements. Does that mean no poem too? Okay. Actually, I talked today with several people about the Brahma Viharas. So I think we should do a chant on that. So these Brahma Viharas are what's called the divine abodes, or the boundless abidings. They are where the mind rests when it is not obstructed by greed, hatred, and delusion. So they are loving kindness, compassion, appreciation, or gladness, sympathetic joy, variously translated in the chant we'll do, it's translated as gladness, and equanimity. So we're going to do the chant that's called the Suffusion with Divine Abidings. So that's where we're heading, to suffuse the heart with these divine abidings. And it's easy in the sense that it is exactly the same 4 times, except for changing the one word. Loving kindness goes to compassion, to what am I doing? Oh, thank you. Gladness to equanimity. Okay. So I know some of the people from Chicago know it. I know some people from Madison know it. Those of you who know it, please join in right away. The rest of you, I think you'll find it not too hard to pick it up after at least the first verse. I will abide, pervading 1/4, with a heart imbued with loving kindness. Likewise the second, likewise the third, likewise the fourth. So above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself, I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a heart imbued with loving kindness, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. I will abide, pervading 1/4, with a heart imbued with compassion. Likewise the second, likewise the third, likewise the fourth. So above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself, I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a heart imbued with compassion, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. I will abide, pervading 1/4, with a heart imbued with gladness. Likewise the second, likewise the third, likewise the fourth. So above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself, I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world. Heart imbued with gladness, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. I will abide, pervading 1/4, with a heart imbued with equanimity. Likewise the second, likewise the third, likewise the fourth. So above and below, around and everywhere, to all as to myself, I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a heart imbued with equanimity, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, hostility and without ill will. And let's just sit for a couple of minutes to take that in. So good to see you.